In America, you're much more entitled to your own facts than you are anywhere else in the world. What you're in is essentially a moral outrage universe. And, moral outrage is the very, very worst place to make policy from. And I think American exceptionalism is the real poison. It's why no one can see what's coming. What happens next in America is you have an iteration of the left that's even worse than the current iteration of the right. The peak of wokeness, armed. You guys are a bus going off a cliff, and we got to get out of the bus before it goes off the cliff. If anything is going to save the U.S. Republic, it will be the U.S. military. And no one has listened even for half a second to any of that. That is like, there's absolutely been no, I mean, everyone knows I'm right, but that doesn't make me feel any better. Like, it has had absolutely zero impact whatsoever as far as I could tell.
Welcome to the Brad Carr Podcast. My guest is Stephen Marche, author of The Next Civil War, Dispatches from the American Future. Stephen Marche, you're a Canadian, but you've spent time in America. What have you seen that you think is distinctly American?
Distinctly American. Well, I mean, I think that's changing very rapidly all the time.
Yeah.
But when I think about what I love about America in particular, it's something, it's sort of, I know this sounds like hard to just, very vague, but the thing I used to really love about America is that you would arrive there from anywhere, even Canada, which is a very free place that you're really allowed to say whatever you want. And everyone, and there was just a freedom to the way people spoke. And there was just an openness about the way that they spoke, that you could notice immediately. You could notice it in the cab drivers or Uber drivers. You could notice it in like the person who sold you a bagel. And I think that was something that I really cherished. Right. That it was, or it certainly was something that spoke to me. Maybe just because I'm a writer and like to have my say, but I like that was that openness to difference and to different expressions. And, it's a free country. That spirit was really something that I loved very much. So.
Yeah. So you see that in the way that people behave. What do you think it is about our country that makes that, or is it that we attract that and then that becomes our country?
No, I think it's actually built into the structure of the country. I mean, I think one of the things is that in America, you are a citizen and you relate to your government as a citizen with freedoms. And in Canada, even in Canada, you're a subject to the crown. Right. Like when you immigrate to Canada, you're allowed to have whatever opinions you want and whatever political beliefs you want, but you have to swear loyalty to the king. Right. And when you become a member of parliament, even if you're a French separatist, right, like even if you are like deliberately want to not have the country to exist anymore, you have to swear loyalty to the king to get your role. And I think being a subject of a crown is actually a very different experience than being a citizen of a place. Right. And probably what's most horrible is that it's exactly that kind of openness and that kind of relationship between people and government that has sort of led to the next civil war, that has led to this incredible breakdown of unity and the rest of it. But like, yeah, I think the openness is based on I'm a citizen of a republic rather than a subject of a crown, and those are fundamentally different relationships to politics.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about how that openness has led to all these factors that are coming together towards civil war. I'm interested in this swearing allegiance to the crown because I was an officer in the United States Navy, and in preparing for this, I looked up the oath that I swore, and I hadn't thought about it in a while, and I'm just going to read it. It would have been, I, Brad Carr, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. So
Yeah. I mean, I've
there's a
seen
lot
that.
in there.
I knew what you were going to read because I've seen that exact expression, that exact phrase on a lot of t-shirts.
Uh-huh.
And a lot and on a lot of bumper sticker. Like, I mean, it's a long thing to have on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
And it's a long thing to have on a bumper sticker of a car too. But I've seen it too. Yeah, exactly. You swear an oath of loyalty to the
To the
Constitution.
Constitution, to this
Yeah.
document that a lot of people who swear that oath have never read.
Well, one of the things I found just totally fascinating when I was crossing the United States for this book was that everyone worships the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the strangest things of all because, like, I'd be going and talking to Texas separatists, and they would speak in this incredibly, like, we need to restore the Constitution. I'm like, there's a separatist movement in Quebec here. They don't want to preserve the British North America Act. Right, like they don't want it. They're not interested in preserving the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Constitution Act of 1982. Like they want to tear it up, right?
Yeah.
And you find that so the Texas separatists worship it, but then New York Times editors also worship it and treat it like Talmud, where they're like literally breaking it into like with little comments on the side of everything, like, and at the same time, in some sense, it's become a totally dead document. Right. Like it's become when you ask people what the meaning of the Constitution is, like, it's not just like random dudes in the Navy who don't get what the Constitution is. Like people are stopping teaching constitutional law in places like Stanford because they don't know what the hell it is anymore, because the interpretations have gone, have essentially become incredibly partisan. So like there is the Constitution is this weird, ghostly document that rests at the absolute core of America, and yet kind of is an empty thing, right? And that's an incredibly vague thing. Although exactly the same thing applies to the king, right? Like when you swear loyalty to the king, you're swearing loyalty to the crown. Like if the king dies, makes no difference, and the king is not entitled to an opinion, right? The king is not allowed to have opinion even on things like architecture. Right, like it certainly he's not allowed to express a political opinion, even of the most vague kind. Right, so like what we expect from a monarchy is basically to be an empty symbol of the whole order. Right, and the Constitution is essentially taken on that role.
We're gonna have to talk about symbols too.
Yeah,
but you said that they don't teach, or they're doing away with constitutional law because of partisanship.
Some professors have resigned. I mean, there was the major one who was the dean of he's like one of the most respected constitutional law scholars at Stanford, I think, maybe Princeton. I can't remember. But there was a New York Times article about how some of them are quitting because they just, what is constitutional depends on who happens to be sitting in the judge's seat, and what it means is actually subject to it's become totally partisan in a way that it really was not in even 20, 30 years ago. Like it's just become a device for partisan partisan like spoils. Like it's whoever controls the courts controls what the Constitution means, so it basically doesn't make any difference what the Constitution actually says. Plus, it's an 18th century document. Right, like it's not I mean, it was a document of great genius, but France is in its fifth republic, right? Like the Canadian Constitution was written in 1982, right? Like anyone can read it and make sense of it. Trying to figure out what people meant in the 18th century by individual words is really hard. And so there's certain kind of inevitabilities about this. Like if a document is around, and I mean, when was the last amendment? The last amendment was. There were some minor ones in the 90s, but real changes to the constitutional order, it's been, decades and decades and decades since that has happened. So it's no longer really a living document. Jefferson said that when a constitution needs to be redone every 19 years, or else, he said, his phrase was, it's a contract with the dead.
Hmm.
right? He believed, like Jefferson
Wow.
believed a contract, like a constitution is actually a political agreement between the government and the people over how they're going to be ruled, right? And that's not what the U.S. Constitution is anymore.
Wow. Yeah. So, Stephen, to understand all of this and these factors about a civil war in America, what did you do to get the scope of all of that?
Well, I mean, I wanted to, the reason I wrote it is that I was sent by a Canadian magazine to cover the 2016 inauguration. And it had, I'm not a war reporter, right? Like, I'm not the guy that you send to Haiti. I'm not the guy that you send, like, I know those people and they're a special breed. I'm not one of them. Um, and it was very, it was very shocking. There were just like, there was a lot of, like basically gangs with cameras poised against each other. The police in the middle, nobody had anything, nobody knew what to do. You had the "This American Carnage" speech, and at that time, I was also like, I was very sick of like how political experts kept being shocked. Like you'd go on television and there'd be the same talking heads, and they'd be like, "It's totally unprecedented." I'm like, well, figure it out, guys. Like if you don't like if you keep being surprised, then we need to like figure out what the system actually is, because obviously it's not what you think it is. So I tried to figure out, how does this work? And to do that, the one thing I wanted was really good political models, like that I could like not just like polling numbers or trends or whatever, like like models that I could explain to readers their strengths and weaknesses, right? Like economic models, I used the IMF economic models, which are the best, but they're not really predictive in any capacity. Environmental models are, they've been in within a quarter of a percentage point since 1967. And then there are various political science models work certain ways, and there's other models that, that you could really establish deep trends. So I talked to about, I guess I talked to about 200 people by the end of it, but like I wanted this entire expert class of models, and then I crossed the country and met, I met far right people, and because I looked the way that I do, they assumed that I was one of them, and I'm from Alberta, which is sort of the Texas of Canada. So I met oath keepers and people like that, and I met people on the far left who were tearing down statues and stuff like that, and also like constitutional sheriffs and various people in various different political levels of strata, to try and understand what was going on. I stayed away from horse race politics because I felt like other people were covering it, and also it seemed like the commentary on it was just nonsense. Like, I mean, it just didn't make any difference who happened to win what election. The trends were there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the process.
Yeah. What is like a scene of one of those meetings where you're with, a group like the Oath Keepers? I mean, are they having spaces that are a place
Yeah.
where you're welcome, or are you kind of hunting them down? Like, how's that work?
Oh, no. I mean, I'm not that kind of guy. I'm perfectly frank with everyone, and I tell them who I am, and I would be upset if the Nazis that I spoke to felt that I misrepresented them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I want to represent people. I don't want to,
Yeah.
impose my agenda on them. I definitely want what people want to tell me. And how they represent themselves. But like, of course they want to talk. I mean, some people think like, oh, it's so hard to get these people. If someone's flying a Confederate flag over their house, they want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. Like and so really I would just go to, often there were like prepper conventions. It'd be like some like, faded mall, like some like grim faded mall in like a small town on the outskirts of like a small town in Ohio. And you go, and there's a lot of booths of people selling like prep stuff, like prepper, prepper materials. Like my favorite one by far was a uh um what's it called when you're allergic to wheat? What's
The
that
the
called?
gluten-free kit.
Gluten-free end of the world rations, which was definitely my favorite. I mean, that's the most American product of all time. It's like, don't let a gluten allergy, disrupt your fun at the end of the world. And they have gardening classes, they have prepper bag classes, and then there's a gun show at all of them, right? Like, and so there's like, and I went to a lot of gun shows. I went to the world's biggest gun show in Oklahoma. I mean, it's not the world's biggest arms show, but it's sort of for people who actually want to, buy rifles and so on. It's the world's biggest gun show. And yeah, and so you meet them, and then, they're the Oath Keepers there, and of course they're just as lovely as pie, right? I mean, like, I didn't meet a single one who wasn't really nice to me, and talk me through everything very gently and very considerately, and with great deal of politeness, right? So like yeah, I mean, and yeah, and so you go to these places, and then they'll have like lectures, so they'll have like survival lectures, but then they'll tend to have like a star guest. So like one I went to was a sagebrush rebel, like one of the daughters of the guy that the FBI shot in was it Washington State? Yeah, I think it was Washington State. And they talk about freedom, and they get everybody in a big lather about that. So I mean, basically an American hobbyist spot. It's just the hobby is the end of the US government, right? Like it doesn't have that much of a different feel from like going to like a baseball card trading fair, right? And it's also real, like, I mean, I remember being in one like end of the world prepping session, and I was like, I don't know what the end of the world prepping session is going to be like, but I'm pretty sure you're going to have to be able to run a mile, and nobody in this room could run a mile. Like, and like, and they're talking about how to take out US forces. It's like, well, I've met the US forces. Like, they're not like, you're not getting anywhere with them. Like, you're not getting within, like, the US forces, they can run a mile. Like, you, and you can't. Like, so yeah, I liked them all. Like, I definitely would have, I would hope they would, feel that I did not misrepresent them.
Yeah.
But they were yeah, they were all very nice in person.
Yeah. This connection between the prepper scene and this fight against the government maybe isn't apparent to everyone, because
Right.
it can look like it's outdoorsmen, or it's people who want to be ready for some sort of natural disaster, thinking of their family.
Yeah.
So what's the tie between that sphere and people who have an issue with the whole government?
Oh, well, I mean, every gun show that you go to in the United States is predicated on resistance to government, right? Like, there's like, you don't go to a gun show to buy a deer hunting rifle, right? Like, I'm in Canada, we're heavily armed, like 50% of the country owns guns, but it's all hunting, it's all because we have so much wilderness. We have a lot of hunters. We have a lot of people who live on acreages. They all need their 22 to rifle to kill gophers and stuff like that. That's not what you're buying at a gun show. I mean, most of the gun shows that I went to would have a sign up on the very top saying these guns are about to be banned, and they're for sale in these places, right, at these stalls, right? No, I mean, I would say the term, when you're dealing with the far right in the United States, it's not a coherent body. Like, it's not a coherent group. That's why, I mean, in the book, I didn't even bother putting them in a chart or anything like that, because I knew that by the time it was published, have changed drastically, right? Like, and I mean, I think they literally changed. Like, when I was reporting on it, it certainly felt like there were major changes every 6 months. Like, I'd call up a source and it'd be like, you were with the Boogaloo Boys, and now you're with like, and so what they are is like, they have I would say they fall under the rough category of anti-government patriots, right? So this is a group where they believe that freedom and America exist in resistance to the government, right? And which is why actually what's happening in Minnesota is so fascinating. But like, the resistance to like, they believe it's resistance to the government is freedom. And the most naked expression of it is the constitutional sheriffs, who believe that they literally are, there's only like 5 things. One of them is piracy. Another one is counterfeiting, that they're not in charge of in their parishes, right, or in their counties, right? And they have a very explicit sense of like resistance to other authority, but it's much broader, and it's resistance to basically any elite institution that you can name, right? So you have people who basically are involved in elaborate tax evasion scams. You have people who are Second Amendment absolutists. You have Christian nationalists who believe in the separation of the church and state is false. And then even within the separate racist groups, you have different approaches, different styles that are often contradictory. And then you have things like sovereign citizenry, which are the most extreme, but they're not really even racist. Like there are certainly black sovereign citizens out there, right? So it's this huge smorgasbord, roughly contained within the notion of anti-government patriot. And of course, that's key to understanding why what's happening now is distinct from the traditional far right in Europe, right? Where the traditional far right in Europe is about dominance of the state. Like that's even if you think of like Brexit in England, they want to restore the dominance of the British state. They don't want to concede any power to a European entity. That's not what the far right in America is. Right. It's much more interested in the destruction of structures of power as such. Right. And that's just a very different thing. But I've wandered away from your original question. Your original question is, like why are these people in prepper conventions?
Yeah, that it's
Yeah.
preppers that seem to connect to this.
Well,
That's sort of a
they're all
publicly
involved in
acceptable
the
shield.
same. Right. It's all a fantasy world, right? And the fantasy, like when they deal with the end of the world, it's always very specific things, right? It's never like a nuclear war because that's no fun to prep for, right? The prepping for a nuclear war is like lie down in a ditch and die. They're always prepping for things that are very suspiciously like the early origins of the American Republic, right? They're prepping for Kentucky in 1805, right? They're not preparing for like the actual end of the world, right? Like they're like how to garden amaranth, which has a lot of protein in it, right? Like like the anti-government patriot I mean, the core fantasy is you will be left on your own. You will need to take care of yourself. You will need to defend yourself from all comers, including the government. You will be in a state of, Jeffersonian isolation, just with removed from any political unity, right? So yeah. I mean, when you go to these prepper conventions, this is a very elaborate fantasy game that they're playing,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not actually. I mean, and they're practicing it. There's one guy who's like, you have to have 9 separate escape routes and you have to bury guns along every route. And then you have to take your children out every weekend and practice the 9 routes. And I'm like, well, this is like camping is what you're doing here. You're basically coming up with an excuse to go camping with your kids, which is great. Although I wonder how the kids are feeling like we have to stop the camping routes to bury guns the whole time. But, this is an aesthetic movement, right? This is not a movement of real politics.
Hmm.
It is in fact, it's anti-politics at its core. So, the connection between these prepper conventions and anti-government patriot movements is they're the same dream, right? They're the same game that they're playing.
Yeah. And Stephen, I want to come back to something eventually, which is that you mentioned how interesting this is in contrast to what's happening in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But also you mentioned nuclear war as a different sort of scenario altogether. And I actually had an episode come out this morning with Annie Jacobson, who wrote Nuclear War, a Scenario.
Right.
And that is the prepper for that is move to New Zealand. Like
and wait to die.
And
right. I mean, there's nothing to do. Right. Like
but
it's not like get your gumption up and get your start gardening in a different way. It's not that, which is what the preppers want.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that it seems you took some inspiration from literature about nuclear war in writing your book. I would just like to maybe for a minute, just what is that connection there for you?
Well, I mean, particularly it was a piece of fiction written for Congress in, I believe, 1978. and it was called Nuclear War, and it just basically was a fictional retelling of what a nuclear war would do to Lawrence, Kansas, and that was turned into the TV series, TV miniseries, although it was just 2 episodes, called The Day After, which is the most successful television series in history. It was watched by more people at the more percentage of the people than any other show ever. It had direct political effects, right? Like Reagan saw it, and then in his diary he says, we have to talk to like they basically started the ICBM treaty the next day. They just, it was just a realization of what putting meat on the bone. Like, we all know nuclear war is horrible. When it's like, well, this is what it'll do to Lawrence, Kansas, becomes a very different matter. So that was 100% the inspiration for the next Civil War, to like see the trends and the patterns that are ripping America apart. Although, I was writing it in 2018. So when I was writing it in 2018, and the original magazine piece that it came out of, it was a very controversial idea. And it seemed like, I mean, certainly it seemed very alarmist. Interestingly, now it's not even a prediction anymore, right? Like now, I mean, now people are reading it as an explanation of why what has happened, basically. And but so it was written intensely like, this is what could happen, here's a warning.
Yeah.
Right. And using fiction to do that based on like, we're literally, it's fiction, but everything can be footnoted.
Yeah.
Right. Like everything can be, it can be like, it's not like I'm imagining things and then sort of justifying them. It's like, no. Every single thing is footnoted so that you can see where I got it from. And like, it's not, the nuclear war stuff was 100%, like, they know exactly what that'll look like. Right. But, like, when I dealt with like what would happen if a serious hurricane hit New York, like, the researchers who did that, they know to the street what'll be hit at what different level, right? So sometimes you're just dealing, and like the chapter 1 where it was like, where it was a full spectrum operation in the homeland, like what that would look like, that was based on the military plan that had been drawn up by the US military, right? So like, so some of these things were just literally, here's what the experts say, let me describe this to you in a way that is not dry, but it's literally just what they're saying, right? Mm-hmm. Like with a sort of a fictional clothing on it. Yeah. And so that's that was the aspiration to get. I mean, it wasn't always possible to get that degree of accuracy, but that was the goal. And where it wasn't accurate, I was able to say, this is how the models work. This is why like, some models are stronger than others, and these are the conflicting models. But I mean, part of this book is like the nonsense that's spewed about American politics all the time. I wanted stuff only that I knew was true, right? That I knew was valid. And so that was really important to me. Not like, literally not to have anything in it that that was like an opinion. It was like, or it was just my opinion. It was just like, okay, this is what the models say. That's all that we're going to do today.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Annie uses the phrase in her book, a nonfiction scenario. And I think there's a lot of overlap there with what you've done.
Well, they know, like with the people dealing with nuclear war, they obviously know much more closely and in detail what is going to happen. I'm dealing with economic models, with like what hyperinflation looks like. These require more projection than the nuclear winter experts. But nonetheless, I that was the goal for me, to get to as close to that as I could.
Yeah. So Stephen, the hope with something like The Day After was kind of realized that it would get all the way to the president, that it would convert to action. Yeah. What do you hope for with your book?
Well, I mean, what I hoped for was, and I also wrote a book with Andrew Yang called The Last Election, about sort of, which was the political, like, this is the deep trends of American politics. That was the horse race politics aspect of this collapse, right? And what I hoped to communicate was, like, the American political system is fundamentally in collapse and requires a rebirth and requires a reevaluation from the ground up. And the hoping, like thinking that the solution is to elect X or not elect Y, or impeach X, or if we only win this election, that's all misguided. The problems that America faces are not problems of individual leaders or of individual political choices, but structural problems that require structural solutions. And no one has listened even for half a second to any of that. Like that is like there's absolutely been no, I mean, everyone knows I'm right, but like that doesn't make me feel any better. Like it has had absolutely zero impact whatsoever as far as I could tell.
Yeah, there's still a fascination with, well, if our candidate gets it, then we'll be all
Yeah.
set.
Oh, well, and it's just like, and I mean, what people don't seem to understand is that moral outrage is the driver of the tear.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like what you need is not to scream louder. What you need is like to figure, what you need is open primaries. What you need is really, really boring things that the moment you do it, will take their foot off the gas of this rage engine that is consuming, your whole politics, but, actually serves the career interests of politicians on both sides very well. Right. I mean, the incentives for the political classes of both sides to live by rage, is just unparalleled. And, I think the lesson, one of the things about being a Canadian and watching this unfold is that I know that it's not the people, right? It's like I've lived in America, right? Like they're not different from Canadian people. They're just not. The people in Minnesota and the people of, Manitoba, they're just not that different, right? Like you would not know if you were at a diner in one or a diner in another. It's the systems. Right, like the systems are in breakdown, and unless the systems are, all this rage is because of these broken systems, right? And so I mean, that's what I hope to communicate. But, while I communicated it adequately, it was not received.
So moral outrage is driving the division.
Mhm.
Let's definitely go more on that. Connected and kind of a tie back here. You'd put Minnesota in contrast to what you're seeing with anti-government patriots. What is that contrast there?
Well, the thing that I found fascinating is like the dream of at all of these gun shows. Like the movie that is playing in their heads, and they have real movies playing in their heads. I mean, you go to these gun shows, one of the things is that they'll sell insurance to you for lawyers if you shoot somebody in your house, right? Like that's a pretty insanely specific form of insurance to buy, but it's because this is a movie that is playing in these dudes' heads, and there's a market response to that movie, right? So the movie that was always playing in their heads is an unconstitutional order comes in, tries to take your guns away, tries to prevent protest. And let's say, I mean, if you're really throwing in the movie, it'd be like they're attacking priests who are on the way there. So all of that's happening, but it's on their side, so it doesn't affect them at all, which is really kind of incredible, because the dream of the NRA, like and I mean, then at these gun shows, like this is what they talk about: government overreach, right? Like that's why you need a gun. And not only that, government overreach by the federal government. So you have a masked federal authority in Minnesota, and it's like their worst nightmare, except that it's them, right? And I mean, there's just a kind of unbelievable irony in that, right? So that's all that I meant about Minnesota.
Yeah, you say that it's them. Um, is it that
Well,
it's
I
them?
don't know if
Is
it's
that
them.
that
Yeah.
it's that it's not them? Maybe I wonder what you
Well,
think about that.
Well, they are all on the right, and they're all very pro-Trump, and they are all, I don't know if they're pro-ICE, those people, but they sure seem it, right? Like if you like the connection seems pretty clear. Like you don't have the NRA coming out and saying, why was a man who just had an open carry permit, why is that an excuse by the government to kill him? Right. You don't see any of that. But I think, what part of what happens in this fury of hyperpartisanship is that basically all values go out the window. Right. I mean,
Mm,
and they just get consumed away, like in the fury of who is my enemy.
yeah.
Right. And what can be done to harm them. So I mean, that's sort of a tortured irony of it, though. But I mean, it's also hard to know where they come back from that, right? Ultimately, you have had this abuse of power by the federal authority, and where's the accountability going to be? Well, you can already sort of see some Republicans walking back on it. But I don't expect, one of the things that happened is when I was in the middle of writing this book, January 6th happened.
Wow.
And several of my friends called me and said, sorry about that. And I was like, why? And he's like, because of course it's writers. We make all history about like our personal little careers. But like but he was, they were like, well, this is the wake up call, right? There's not going to be like the America's going to walk back from the extremism. Now they've had this, near death experience. Like, and I was like, that's not how this works. Right. Like that, like they'll figure out a way to get to justify all this like that. Right. Like it's not hard to do. And that is indeed what happened.
Yeah, that justification, the idea of the movie that plays in the head of someone going through this. I mean, you think of movies where you have a character who is essentially doing something terrible. I'm thinking of John Wick, who kills 1,000
Right.
guys in those movies,
Right.
but he has this justification because they killed my dog, and
Right.
so you just run with that, and then the fantasy of becoming like, a John Wick type character who's superhuman, super lethal, and all the power that comes with that could be so attractive.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a storyteller, you're a novelist. I mean, is the story feeding the outrage thing?
Well, I mean, one of the things I really did miss in the book, like I think I got a lot of things right. I was going to write, and I was going to write a chapter on social media.
Yeah,
Right. And but what is and so I did all the research and I was talking to all the people, and then one piece of research I came across was like, well, Canada has more social media engagement than the United States, and Germany has more media engagement than the United States, but they don't have anywhere near the kind of toxic politics that emanates from that the United States does. So I was like, well, it must not be that. Right, like it must, like I have to not do this chapter because like this must just be a red herring, like it must just be like a false equivalence, and but I think what I really didn't understand was the power of entertainment in the United States is just so overwhelming that I mean, when you look at the Trump administration right now, where you have, essentially, a talking head, a Fox talking head running the military. You have people who play doctors on television running health departments. You have if you haven't been on on Dr. Phil, like you're not really like considered appropriate for government. And entertainment really did kind of conquer American politics, right? I mean, Trump is the reality television president. That is
yes,
how he works. And I think when the only logic you can really ascribe to his practices are attention gathering metrics, right? Like he is laser focused on gathering attention to himself at all times, right? For good or bad. It's really an indifferent thing to him, right? And so those kinds of narrative structures really do overwhelm American political structures pretty intensely, right? And so the movie, everyone's got a movie playing in their own heads. I mean, I think abortion to me is like really the one of the very interesting cases, because before Roe v. Wade was being overturned, abortion in the United States was declining at about an 8% rate. right? Like it was an extremely happy. If you were a technocrat and your job was reduce the abortion rate in the United States, you would be very happy with how things are going. But what happened is that people want to scream at each other. Right. And one side wants to scream life and the other side wants to scream choice. And in between that, the policy questions, like what are our collective aims what can the government do? If our collective aim is to reduce abortion, then what do we do? Like, how do we, like, is legislation the right answer to it? Or is there some other thing that, that is the correct answer to it? But instead you have this like, overwhelming narrative where one side needs to win and the good guys won and they stop the baby killers from killing babies. Meanwhile, abortion rates go up, right? Like because there's no policy. It's just the idea that you can punish your way out of this is wrong, right? Like that's not actually how this works. And countries, Canada has no laws about abortion. It is strictly a matter for the woman and the doctor, but also the medical association. Like it's like a practice that's among the doctors. And we have 3/4 of the abortion rate in the United States. Right. Like it's not like the effects of these, because policy, if you're actually trying to shape public ends with policy, you can do a lot. But if you're just screaming at each other and one side has to win and the other side has to lose and everyone has these competing movies playing in their heads, it makes for a much more interesting politics, but it doesn't make for actual solutions to actual problems in the world,
So if Americans have lower social media engagement than, say, Canadians, but
it's very slight.
Okay.
It's very slight. It's like 0.1. It's just like Canada and Germany are slightly higher. Right?
Okay. Okay. But we have this extreme entertainment culture. How important do you think social media is in the factors that are coalescing towards civil war in America?
Well, it's funny because I was so resistant to blaming them because and I wrote, I've written several highly critical things about social media. I wrote the Atlantic cover story called "Is Facebook Making Us Lonely" in 2012, which was one of the first big pieces about like the social costs of social media and like how it was leading to depression and loneliness among people. And I did some of the first work on that stuff. So it's not like I'm, so I really wanted to write this like, let's put this all at Zuckerberg's door and and go for a rest. But like I think it's honestly, it's a combination. It's a catalyst. It obviously is having an effect. It obviously is making a massive difference. But it's the way that it interacts with a previously existing culture and society that is different, right? That it just has different outcomes because of the difference in American culture, right? In America, you're much more entitled to your own facts than you are anywhere else in the world, right? Like you're like you don't that's the great thing about America, right? Like that's why you get Bob Dylan, right? Like that's why you get like Mormonism. Like it's like we're here. If you want to start your own religion, you go right ahead and do that. You think you get your own planet? Great. Let's see how your insurance plans are, right? Like you want to do underwear? I mean, go right ahead. We might make fun of you a little bit, but you're fully entitled to your own religion. That's not how things work in most of the rest of the world, right? Like the facts are owned by experts and elite classes, right? And we're all subject to the crown. So I think the way that social media interacted with this inherent American individuality and this understanding that individual expression is paramount. Also combined with a hyperpartisanship that was already toxic, right? And the deep trends that, you can read about that, but like the decline in the faith of institutions that's been totally consistent since about 1980. Right. So that's not, that has nothing to do with Facebook. It's just that when it hits Facebook, it just hits with, it's like gasoline on the fire that's already there. But so I would say it is a cause, but it's not like, oh, Zuckerberg screwed his whole country up. That's not really how it is.
If we did away with it, would things be better?
Oh yeah. I mean, for all of us, like
Yeah.
if we yeah, but I mean, also if we didn't have television, everything would be better, right?
Yeah.
Like,
You
I
talk to
mean,
your neighbors.
there's a lot of poisons we're putting in ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Like, and social media is definitely one of them.
Hmm.
But, I mean, I feel, I'm on a show that I'm expecting you to send me clips for me to put on social to promote my work, right? So like it's I mean, yeah, in a dream world none of us would have social media, but that's not the world we inhabit.
Right. So it would be the place. I mean, you write about a spark. It, social
Mm.
media would be the place where a spark would become a fire. Yes?
No, I think it would be I mean, I think the spark could come from anywhere.
Okay.
But to me, what the social media networks are the accelerants.
Okay.
Really, they're how minor events just go global like that,
Okay.
right? And the stakes of things go from, I mean, during the Black Lives Matter, like one viral video of one act of police brutality causes national movements, right? Like, and not just, and almost instantly, right? Like, without social media, that's one killing in one city that is one news item that no one reads, right? So, like, to see what what social media does is it spreads things through this network,
Okay.
right? And the network also, it's important to remember, works on the primary driver of social media engagement is moral outrage,
Yes.
right? So like that is the number one driver. I think it's actually maybe number two. I think number one is actually awe, but like, but it's rare, right? Like moral outrage is like that is how the network takes on a logic of its own, so that what you're in is essentially a moral outrage universe. And moral outrage is the very, very worst place to make policy from, right? Like that's why we got the churches out of government, right? Is because the best place to make policy from is calm, humanistic, policy driven, pagan, what works best for for a lot of people, right? And the drivers of moral outrage essentially make that impossible.
Hmm. Okay. Would there be changes to social media that could make this better in some way without getting rid of it?
Definitely. I mean, well, I think the question that needs to be asked, and it's a big question because it goes right to the core of freedom of expression, is like what is the algorithm? Like what is the AI algorithm driving YouTube and Facebook right now? Like um is it speech? Like, is it the same thing as controlling a newspaper, and therefore it's fundamentally private, and therefore and that's the best way to run the system? Or is it in fact some kind of collective entity that requires a collective response? I mean, that's the answer that China gives. That's the answer that Asian countries give, and their social media networks are incredibly beneficial for their societies in a way that they have been incredibly destructive for our own. But to to make that kind of decision, essentially imitating communist China, would require a death of freedom of speech that would be, I mean, toxic as hell. But I think increasingly this debate around what is a social media, what is an algorithm, and what constitutes its value, and who controls it and who has a right to control it. That's that's I think that's going to be more and more of a question for us. I
Hmm.
don't think I have an answer for that. Both answers seem to me really terrible.
Both answers being what?
Some kind of governmental control of the algorithm and stewardship for
Hmm.
the public good, or leaving it in the hands of private companies who maximize engagement at all points to literally do not care that teenagers are committing suicide at an accelerated rate, so long as they have more advertising dollars, like another billion to throw on the pile. I mean, that's where we're at with social media right now. It seems to me pretty damn toxic, right?
Hmm.
Like, and evidently so. But how to control it, I think is actually, I don't have an easy answer for that. I don't know what it is.
Hmm. Yeah, and you're talking about putting it under the influence of the government more directly.
Well,
Tran
that's just
transparency,
one answer. Like, I mean,
yeah.
or some regular, I mean, radio was put under a regulatory body in the 30s because people understood that it was too powerful. And the places that didn't have a regulatory body were Germany and Italy. Right. And the power of the radio, like, right, it took over those places. Like people, the reason there was fairness doctrine, was because people saw what the radio did to countries, when it wasn't regulated. And we had that for television until Reagan. And I mean, I mean, if you really want to like chart where decline of trust in institutions comes from, the end of the fairness doctrine, I mean, it could be a coincidence, but like it is that year that things really start to fall apart in American political discourse, right? Like where you have the overlapping of entertainment and news, you have the overlapping of opinion and news, you have essentially the breakdown of any kind of set of common facts. And there was a measure taken by FDR and then continued by Eisenhower and others with television, to understand that these forces of mass media are not indifferent, right?
Hmm.
They're not neutral, but
Yeah,
like a free speech absolutism took over, and a deregulatory fervor took over in the Reagan years, and it all disappeared. The liberals who came to power, Clinton and so on, they were more interested in vague social programs, and like structural questions like the fairness doctrine were of very limited interest to them. And you can see the result.
hmm,
And we
yeah,
have section what is it, section 240. Is it 240 or is it 420? What's going on with my brain? Well, the social media one that gives them no alibi, that gives them a complete legal alibi. I mean, that needs to be done away with. But but it won't, because now they're so powerful, right? That they are essentially, inseparable from government at this point. I mean, Google has $198 billion profit per quarter, right? Like no one is going to mess with them.
sure. Yeah. You mentioned by contrast China, and that
Mm.
their social media networks are advantageous to the population.
Yeah.
How does that work? I've heard these things that we get a different TikTok in the US than they have in China, that sort of thing, but I don't know much about it.
Well, I've never used it, so these are all third-party reports. So my opinion's probably not worth anything. In fact, it isn't worth anything. But it's used. Like there are metrics for social benefit. I mean, first of all, it totally erases any political difference of any kind, right? So you don't have to worry about hyperpartisanship. It's a one-party state, and everyone has the same opinion. Good, bad, I mean, so that's
But it's
one
off the table.
obvious thing. That's off. That's gone,
Yeah.
right? And then, as I understand it, but again, these are entirely from third party reports. They consciously promote things that have social benefit. So like successful doctors rather than Kim Kardashian on the beach, right? But I don't really know how true that is. All I know is that they have control over their social media networks, and they use it as a tool of social control rather than the anarchy, the chaos machine that we have, which is, literally giving free speech a bad name.
Yeah. And Stephen, you're talking about knowing what is true. For you,
Mm.
as a professional journalist, someone who's thinking about these things, how do you sort through what is true as we have more, AI slop, deep fakes, these sort of
Yeah.
things that are out in the world?
Well, I don't believe that journalism deals with the truth. I think truth is for priests and philosophers. What I think journalism deals with is facts, which
Okay.
is a really separate question. Facts are small details, that are things that people have agreed stop fighting about, basically, right? And the so the facts. I mean, the reason I wrote the book is to get out of the opinion space and into the fact space. So I based it on the models of the best available researchers at the time. I mean, what the models that I like are ones that explain their own weaknesses, right? Because the truth of any model that you're using is that all models are wrong. Some models are interesting, right? Like you use this to paint a picture that is, the best available information that we have, right? It's not grand. It's not the truth. It's not like but it's like this is the best available picture of the situation that we can provide, right? And that to me is very important. That's the job, right? As opposed to something like the truth, as opposed to wading through AI slop. I mean, increasingly, I don't believe anything until I've talked to a person. I mean, I think I'm getting to that point now where I just literally don't believe anything that I read until although it's funny because books actually operate on a different way because they're not part of the network, right? They're separated from the network. So they have a different kind of reality to themselves. But I mean, if I want to understand something, I barely go on the internet anymore. I call somebody.
Yeah. And obviously, I mean, with what I do, very similar. I'm putting a lot of energy into reading books and talking to human beings. And it's
But isn't that
slowing
why
me down.
podcasts are becoming are the major news source now? Because like talking to me about this is actually probably a better way to get information about this than reading 500 articles.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, genuinely, that's probably true. I mean, it's weird, but like I mean, I feel the same way. If I want to understand something, I have to talk to somebody about it.
Yeah. So part of our understanding is the symbols. This whole network of symbols that we have. A quote from your book: "Countries live and die by symbols." So what's the importance of symbols in your book?
Well, I mean, what I was trying to understand was the destruction of all these statues, right? And and particularly the unfinished legacy of the Civil War. I mean, that was the particular context written about that. But of course, the thing about America is that it's just so unbelievably great at symbols, right? I mean, that is what it is. I mean, there's no country in the world that can compete with the symbolic creation of unity that the United States has. I mean, look at the flag. Like that's a top flag. And of course, like the other thing is that like when you elect a president, you're essentially electing a national symbol. You even talk about these periods as like the Clinton era, the Obama era, the Trump era, right? I mean, a Canadian prime minister is a servant. Like they're a civil servant that is elected to do a job, and that's it. And they try, and it's a big difference because like, and Trudeau, when he put out his platform, right, he fulfilled 92% of that platform. Right. Like you can go when you elect him, you can go and read the Liberal Party platform. It will explain what he's going to do, and he's going to do it. And the conservative guy before him, the Stephen Harper, the right wing guy, he got to 94%. Right. Like he fulfilled 94% of his election promises. Right. So when you're voting for these people, you're actually voting for the 6% or 8%, like that's, chance has its way, situations arise, or maybe they didn't know what was going on. But basically, they're going to do what they say. So you can go and check what they're going to say, and you're just voting for what they say. Wow. They're going to do. Right. And that's a very big difference than should America be the America of Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Mm-hmm. That's a symbolic question, right? That is, and that's why, whenever you meet these American politicians, their charisma is just unbelievable, right? And Canadian politicians, it's like you don't notice them. Right, like I have more charisma than maybe not Mark Carney today, but I've met Mark Carney, and like Mark Carney is not a rock star. Sure. He's not. He's just a banker, right? And of course, I much prefer it that way. But the American capacity to create symbols always been its strong suit. I mean, always been the most powerful thing about it. And of course, one of the most amazing things about America is that even as it is, has this nationalistic unity and has always had, it's always been the most diverse country in the world, right? I mean, its diversity is second to none, right? I mean, that's like Canada is a multicultural country, but we're 75% white. Like America's 55% white, right? Like, but it's not just that. It's the geographical diversity. It's the inequality. It's the income diversity. It's the realities of how many countries are in America at any given moment. Like how many places are like, you go and it's like, oh, they still basically have slavery here. Oh, this is the Upper East Side. It's like the most sophisticated European capital imaginable. Like that kind of just raw diversity was always contained within these symbols. E pluribus unum. I mean, it really did have that capacity to control difference within a unified framework. And of course, when the symbols go, that unity goes too.
Mm. So being the fish in the water that doesn't necessarily know it's wet, I'm hearing you say that America has more symbols than other places, and that we're sort of unique in this. We got the flag, we got the president. What else is coming to mind?
Dude, nobody else in the world goes around chanting. Nobody goes USA, USA. Nobody does that. Like nobody in the world does that except Americans. Okay, like let's take that as a starter.
Okay,
but,
and we're in an Olympic year. I mean, the Olympics are right around the corner, so that's
if
already
happen.
going.
Right. It's already going. Like, well, but it's also the ultimate one, the dollar. Right, like the ultimate symbol of total dominance, right? But I mean, it's not just that. It's that well, as we were saying, the Constitution, right? Like the Constitution is this symbol that has this incredible attraction. Like it really does unify people in a way that, like, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to Canadians is just a document. If we have symbols that we love, they tend to be like landscapes. Right? They tend to be like, moments of wilderness or maybe a few historical figures. But, America creates these historical, like Rosie Parks, for instance. Like the incredible symbolic power of that woman is like, I will not stand up on a bus. I'm going to stay seated. Like that symbolism is just unbelievable. Right. But I mean, that's just one example. You could go through the whole of American history and do that. Lincoln getting assassinated, and then the guy jumps on stage and says "Sic semper tyrannis" and flees. Like, it's a dramatic place. It has this semiotic around it that creates these hugely meaningful realities that, even more, ethnically homogenous and much older countries with deep unified languages, for example, don't really have the same appeal to their symbols that you guys do.
Okay. And so
do you agree with that?
Now it's coming, but
right.
It's in comparison, and I am in it so much that it's
like the Danish
to
are
project
like
out is interesting.
They speak their own language. They have their own shows. They have a lot of things that they're proud of. But like, their king, like they just make fun of that, right? Like it's not the same thing as like worshiping the Constitution, which is really, I mean, that's an American thing that's just totally unique.
Yeah,
totally unique.
Yeah, we have movies about people trying to steal the Constitution.
Nobody in Britain worships the Magna Carta. Like they don't,
which is a really impressive old document.
I mean, it's very, very important. Yeah. It's very, very powerful document. No one is above the law, not even the king. Like that's a pretty important little statement for human history, right? But yeah, I think America is unique in that way for sure.
So we have all these symbols. You said earlier that they have a great power, perhaps in unifying us in a way that would be hard given how different parts of America are, people in America are. As far as the Civil War, do they make us vulnerable as well? Or how does it play?
Well, the Civil War, I mean, because there was this great retrenchment between 1866 and 1867, by 1876, I mean, by 1876, the South had essentially won its resistance. right? Like the North was like, we're not fighting this anymore. You guys do whatever you want. Like, I don't know what you're going to do to these poor African American people, but like, we can't fight you anymore, right? And that was the kind of deal that was made in 1876. Before then, there was a deep attempt to unify the country after this wound, right? And that involved a lot of statues to the war deads on both sides. This very consciously attempt to not call anyone on the South a traitor, not to accuse anyone of treason, except
Right.
for people who actually were traitors to their causes. The mythologies around Robert E. Lee, and of course now this is all made fun of, and this is all mocked in a very deep way. But like and they started tearing down these sculptures, even to Nathan Bedford Forrest and people like this, of this nature. But that unity, that fusion of those two sides was the United States of America. The United States of America would not have existed if we're not capable of symbolically reconciling these two irreconcilable halves, right? And that, I mean, I think that's been true about the United States from the beginning of its history. Right, where you have, I mean, people think about Canada as the compromising country, or America as like uncompromising, but actually it's incredibly based on very profound compromises about like who is a person, right? Like, when one group of people is 3/5 of a person, right? That shouldn't really be capable of being compromised, and yet there was a compromise about it. You have, and I don't think it's simply about slavery, even though of course that's, until the end of the 19th century is like the dominant question. It's really a irreconcilable view about the nature of the relationship to the state as a whole. When we talk, the anti-government patriots that I'm talking about, I mean, that's that's a huge chunk of the founding fathers would fall into that category, right? And certainly a huge number of Southern partisans would fall into that camp completely, right? Like they would absolutely recognize each other 250 years apart, right? Like, I mean, and that's something that actually happens interestingly in a lot of countries that are founded by partisan warfare, where they have trouble stopping violence because they're founded in violence, right? And the compromises that they come to are always after the fact of the violence. So and that's like Algeria is the classic case of that, where it was founded by partisans, but they really couldn't stop the logic of, if you're oppressed by your government, take up arms, right? Like once you start in on that logic, then it becomes, well, I did this against the French, why wouldn't I do it against these guys, right? And similarly, I think in America, and there were cases, the Whiskey Rebellion, even the War of 1812 is possible to read in that light. I mean, because it was a war fought over the nature of citizenship and the nature of like what loyalties are owed to what groups, by ordinary people, right? And so these deep contradictions were papered over by slapdash symbols, right? And those symbols, they just started to fall apart. They just started to fall apart. But if you don't have, like, every country is based on a lie, right? Or maybe that's the wrong word. Maybe myth would be better, right?
Cool.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's based on a myth, and this American myth worked actually quite well for 250 years. It just started to collapse under its own weight, really. And the result is, who is an American? And you have two very, very different concepts of what America is. I mean, the next Civil War, as I imagine it, is a war fought over the meaning of America, right? Like it's not over territory. It's not over resources or anything of that nature. It's fought over what is the meaning of freedom? What is the meaning of America?
Mm-hmm. So, Stephen, let's ground that a little bit. What is our myth, and what are some of those symbols that are breaking down that held the myth for a while?
Well, the myth, I mean, there are many myths in America, right? Like, to break down the whole of the, that's what Ken Burns has been doing his whole life, and he's only got, he's only done like 6 of them.
Yeah.
right? Like there's a lot of American myths to unpack. I mean, I would say the one that I experience with the far right groups is a particular myth of the concept of freedom, right? And a particular freedom that is unknown anywhere else in the world. I mean, and so I mean, just to be clear, this is only one thread of this, but like, you know, I remember hearing a sagebrush rebel speak, and she was like, "You're all slaves." Why are we slaves? Well, if you don't pay your property taxes, the government will come and take your house away. So you don't really own your house. So you don't really own anything. And I was like, if to be free, if the only way to be free is to not pay any tax, then no one in human history has ever been free ever. Like you're literally talking about a utopian, but it's not even utopian because there's no society that could ever function that way. So you're really dealing with like something closer to like paradise, right? And the paradise that they imagine is a wilderness in which they are alone and they are fully independent and self-reliant, right? Like Emerson, like Emerson, right? Like the true lonely American, totally self-contained. um and that is impossible, right? Like that is a myth because it is, no one can live that way, right? And certainly no one in the 21st century can live that way. Nobody with a phone. I mean, if you're a phone, you're like in a incredibly controlling network, right? That is like actually incredibly restrictive, right? Compared to any other form of history, right? Right. I mean, my wife knows where I am at all times, right? Like that's weird. Like
Yeah.
that's like, it's actually super weird, right? But that's totally normal, right? That's so you have that I would say is the fundamental myth that I experienced on the right, right? The myth on the left is that and I mean there are many myths on the left. Is fundamentally that the United States is the best system in human history ever invented, and that its government and practices are the gold standard of the world, and that they were raised in this like and even when you, I mean, it's so extraordinary to talk to like senior Democratic leadership at this point in American history, and they still think that it's all like the American political system is the only political system that would make sense for freedom loving people in the world, right? So I mean, on both sides you have ultimately American exceptionalism, right? And I think American exceptionalism is the real poison. You know, it's the real essence of the poison. It's why no one can see what's coming, because they ultimately think they're not the same as other countries, and that the rules of the things that happen in other countries can't happen in America. I mean, do you think that what happened in Germany and Italy happened in the 30s happened because they were bad people? No, they happened because of like structures. They happened because of like failures. Like it wasn't because like Germans were mean, right? Like that may be some kind of like fun kind of joke we want to tell on, you know, on in sitcoms or something like that, but that's not actually what happened, right? And so this notion that America floats free of history really is the myth that is well, it's crumbling all the time. But I mean, to me, increasingly I think that is the poison, because they just don't like the consequences of this inaction on the political structures thing is, I mean, it's getting violent. People are going to die, right? Like innocent people are going to die.
Yeah.
And if you don't take steps, that's what'll happen. And you have to recognize you're not that different from the rest of the world and from history. But you know, and I would say I find it more strict on the left.
Hmm.
Like there's a certain kind of like law school graduate on Democratic lawyer who really fundamentally believes that anyone who thinks that America isn't the solution to all of life's problems is just ignorant. Right. Like that. And that's, I mean, at this point in history, you know, that's becoming increasingly more and more laughable.
Hmm. So our greatest myth, the great American myth, could be American exceptionalism. And the dangerous logic there is that we're hooked on the idea that we're not vulnerable. It's a logic of hubris, which actually makes us incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I would describe it as a logic so much as an instinct. You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
like an assumption.
Yep.
It's like an ingrained assumption. It's like it's literally you've been taught it your whole life. No one's ever questioned it. You know,
Yep.
your teacher, like no one, no radio show that you've listened to has ever questioned it. No teacher has ever brought it up. Like it's just ingrained. So it's an assumption. It's not even questioned. So it's not properly a logic so much as it's just like a blindness, right? Like an inability to see what's right in front of your face.
Right.
Like, right. Like, and that's what, I mean, that's why I could write this book because I'm a Canadian.
Yep.
Because I've lived in America. I love America. You know, I have my Trump voting cousin in Seattle. I've got like, you know what I mean? I've got like, you know, I was a columnist at Esquire for 8 years. Like I worked, you know, I've certainly made the majority of my income from American sources, right? So I feel like I know America intimately. Like, you know, it's not like it's not my mother, but it's definitely like, you know, a place that I love and have a lot of connections to. But I have not been taught that it's the only answer to the world's problems,
Yeah.
right? Like, and when you haven't been taught that, it's very clear that it isn't.
Hmm. So we have these symbols that keep our myths going. What would be the symbol or symbols of our exceptionalism?
Well, I mean, you know, one of the most, you know, when you're charting the decline of these institutions, right? So like American institutions, the trust in institutions generally declines, and it's not one institution. It's not like it's just a government.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, faith in the Boy Scouts declines, faith in churches, faith in media, faith in all institutions declines. The one exception was the military, right? And
That's what I was thinking.
and the military is uh, Democrats and Republicans both, and I don't think it's unrelated to the fact that they swear an oath to the Constitution, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're explicitly tied to the Constitution. They do not serve. They serve the United States. They do not serve the president, and they don't really have a politics. Right, like they don't like they do not have a politics, so I would say that they're overwhelmingly a dominant symbol. I mean, I think one of the most horrific things about bringing in the National Guard into Washington, where people are spitting in their faces, right? I mean, like and into Minnesota as well, is like you're. I think part of the reason for this is to politicize the military
Yep.
finally. Right. To make to not have the military transcend the partisan garbage that has consumed every other aspect of American life. Right. And when that to force the military to make a choice of which side they're on. Right. And of course, hoping that it'll be the empowerment of the Trumpist faction. I'm not sure that it's going to work. I think actually I have a lot of contacts in the military. They're extremely serious people. They take their responsibilities pretty intensely. I mean, if I were to, if anything is going to save the U.S. Republic, it will be the U.S. military. But I mean, that is terrible. Like that's a terrible, terrible burden to put on those people. It's actually the worst thing. I mean, it's a sign of breakdown in itself.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is what happens in places like Chile. Places like the military becomes the only group that anyone can rely on. So they in effect become the power. That's the opposite of what you're supposed to have in a civil society. Right. So like, but I think that's I don't see any other way. Like they're the last institution standing in America in some horrible way.
Yeah. Yep. And as somebody who's been in that institution, there are amazing people in there. And then there are people who just get in, like we talked about at the beginning, who probably haven't read the Constitution. And who knows where it goes. Yeah. I mean,
how many veterans are there in America now? It's like 22 million or something.
Millions.
Or is it? I think it's somewhere around the 20 million number.
Right. So,
so that's a massive group of.
It's a huge responsibility on such an organization, in a game that probably a lot of people don't realize that they're playing.
They're built not to play it.
Tell me about that,
They're
because that's something I read about in your
well
book too.
because I mean, one thing that the U.S. military has always failed at, and they've written many reports on it, and this is fully acknowledged by senior levels of leadership, is that they do not know how to navigate cultures.
Yep.
Right. They don't understand the cultural dimension of war.
Yep.
They don't. And that's what, I mean, that, when you read the report on like why we lost in Afghanistan, why we lost in Iraq, that's the number one reason. They just don't, and the reason for that is that they're fundamentally built not just to not know that, but to avoid knowing it. Right? Like, they're not supposed to be involved in the political machinations of their country. They're supposed to serve at the pleasure of the president and serve these executive functions that are with a very steady chain of command. And they're not supposed to think outside the lines. Right? Like that's not just a should. That's like in the code of conduct. Right? So like when you have those kind of, and of course, the system rewards people who follow those lines,
100%.
right? And so when you are faced with, the situations in Vietnam, I mean, you have senior leaders in Vietnam, so senior military leaders realizing 10 years after the Vietnam War that they were fighting a civil war in Vietnam, right? Like they didn't, and they were like, it blew our minds. We went back and talked to them and said, oh, you were fighting a civil war. We had no, I mean, how could you not know this, right? Like, but they're not built, civilian societies do not want them asking these questions. They want them following the protocols of the political leadership, right? So you have that inherent weakness, but then when you bring it back into when you bring it into the homeland, then it becomes toxic times a million, right? Like, then it becomes really like, do you want Joint Chiefs of Staff sitting around picking who they want as president? Like, I mean, they certainly don't want to be doing that. I mean, that from everyone that I have talked to in various sources, like, that's their nightmare, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the absolute nightmare scenario for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have, but on the other hand, they're being politicized, right? Like, they're being converted into this entertainment activity.
Yep.
Right? Like they're being told, do kinetic action, because, I mean, think of so you've been in the Navy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about Hegseth and those 800 men and women that he called into his office to give a lecture about, like, uniforms. Like, I've met a couple of those 800 guys in that room. I mean, those are some serious people.
Yes.
Like, those are people who have made extreme decisions, been in control in very complicated situations, control huge numbers of people, and are responsible for, literally tens of thousands of lives. And they're being lectured by this talking head about how they should dress.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, what are they going to do about, like, they're not up to this moment. Like, it's not it's not a question of their abilities, right? Like, it's a question of they're not in the entertainment sector, and American politics has become the entertainment sector, and they don't. How could they know what to do, right? This is one of the major perils, and I didn't put that in my book. Right. Like, that's the entertainment chapter, the social media chapter. Like, that's why social media, like, in a sense, that's a red herring. The problem is that when you have the military being asked to conduct kinetic actions for the Twitter feed of of the president, right? When you're asked to commit kinetic actions so that Fox News has something to air on Christmas Day, right? Like, this is a different level of meaning than they've ever been exposed to.
Yeah. It's being used to make spectacle. And
Correct.
Kinetic is this euphemism for big violence. I mean,
Yep.
like the whole thing. Yeah. When you're in, you don't know. You couldn't guess. I think that was the game you were going to be brought into play when you joined the military. I mean, it's just it's
Well,
yeah.
what I mean, aren't you in the military because you're the opposite of all that? I
Right.
mean, like, I mean, certainly I mean, they're not even good at talking to reporters, right? Like, never mind, like, being on television, and that's the way they should be.
Yeah.
Like that. Don't get me wrong. That's not a criticism, but they've never been very good at the cultural aspects of war, and now that culture has actually infiltrated their institution, um, they're not they're just not the kind of men who can and women who can make a response to this. They're not trained in it. They don't understand this world, and it's a real risk.
Hmm. So our greatest myth is our exceptionalism. Our greatest symbol of
Yes.
that is perhaps the military. And then
Well, I would say the dollar.
the
And
dollar
I
is
mean
the
the fact,
greatest.
well, the dollar was 88% of all international transactions before Trump too. Right.
Okay.
I mean, the dollar was the basis of the world. I
Hmm.
mean, and that was why, like, you had power over Iran and all these places because you could just turn off the money.
Hmm.
Right. And like, that's, that's eroding at a rate that I mean, when I wrote this book, the year I was thinking of was 2040. It wasn't like 2026, right? And the slow erosion of the dominance of the US dollar. I mean, things are going to get very real very quickly if it loses its reserve currency status. I mean, I didn't even put that in the book. I mean, the IMF guy talked about it. I considered it too outlandish, right? Because it was too central to these systems, right? Like it's central to the way the European Union functions. And like when China made deals with Brazil, it was in American dollars, right?
Wow.
And that was the only form of international exchange fundamentally. And now Brazil and China operate on yuan. Africa is moving to the yuan. You'll have to buy if you're an American business and you want to like buy germanium from the Congo, you'll probably in 5 years have to pay in yuan. You probably won't pay in American dollars.
Hmm. Stephen, how does the Civil War in America end?
Gosh, I wish I knew. I mean,
Hmm.
first of all, we're still a long way from civil war, right? The technical definition, the definition that I use from PRIO is 1,000 combatant deaths a year, right? So
And that,
like
that definition comes from where?
Peace Research Institute of Oslo. So
Thank
they're
you.
the ones who provide the basic models for what a civil war looks like, how institutional delegitimacy leads to increases in political violence. All of that material, it's borrowed straight from them. Incidentally, they were dead right. They like whether I was right or, but those guys, they had it right to a T. So that what we're seeing in Minnesota is called, the technical term is one-sided violence against civilian populations, right? So it's not actually the same thing as civil war or even civil conflict. I think America has firmly entered a period like the Troubles in Ireland, or like the days of lead in Italy, where there are going to be a lot of assassinations and political violence is going to be very common. And not only that, but political violence has more power. Like it actually has effects on political realities that it doesn't in a democracy. And that's actually more of the trouble. I mean, I'm desperate to find a way for America to get out of it. I mean, just try open primaries for starter guys. But like, but I mean, what I don't see is anyone trying to get out of it. Right. I mean, that like America, like obviously I wrote against American exceptionalism, but I will say this, that there is no country in the world that does more changes more rapidly than the United States. I mean, if anyone can get themselves out of this mess, it's you guys, right? If anyone can get themselves out of this mess, it's the Americans, right? But you have to want to, right? And like I don't see that. I mean, I see it from ordinary people, but like when it actually comes to like reforming the system or contemplating real political possibilities, like maybe breaking up into multiple countries, maybe I mean at least a new constitutional convention. I mean, France is in their fifth republic. right? Like they've been through what you're going through 4 times, and
Yeah.
each time they had it, and it just the constitutional order breaks down. And it needs reformulation. It needs reform, which is in keeping with the earlier republics. I mean, in France would certainly see itself as a continuity, but you need a new basic agreement on what constitutes the United States of America,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's of course a tall order, but there are lots of small things to do too. I mean, well, certainly nothing will pull you away during the next 3 years, right? I mean, like threatening to attack Greenland, sending the constant upping of the stakes over the past year, and just the constant barrage. I mean, nothing can be done while this torrent of garbage is pouring over you.
Mhm.
But what comes at the end of it, I'm actually very curious about that. I mean, America does have a way of creating in itself its own contradictory responses. I mean, like if we were sitting on Obama's inauguration day and said, yeah, this is what it'll be like in 2026 in America, I mean, no one would have believed you, right? Right? Like that's the American thing, right? They're
Yeah.
so unpredictable. I mean, the complementary radicalization model, which is one of the biggest models that I used in the book to explain hyperpartisanship, and something I do think is a pretty powerful model. It would say that what happens next in America is you have an iteration of the left that's even worse than the current iteration of the right. Right. So you have I know. So you have, because essentially, right, like it's become normalized to deport people for their political opinions. Right. Like this, like everyone 20 has seen people rounded up because they co-signed an op-ed on Israel. Right. And that's all been normalized. Sending in federal authority to impose your will on states, normalized. Calling in the National Guard, that's all been normalized. Right. Um, what happens if the left decides, okay, we're going to use the same stuff on the right, right? Except we're going to up it a bit. I mean, it would be like 2022, but armed. Sorry, like 2020, like the peak of wokeness, armed, like that. I mean, that's what one model says happens next. So then, I mean, then it gets crazier and more violent, and you have resistance, and I mean that would be truly disastrous. But
Yeah.
it seems to be careening towards disaster anyway.
Yeah. Stephen, you mentioned the upping of the stakes. There is
Mm.
the threat toward Canada. For you as a
Yeah.
Canadian, how do you view that?
Oh, I mean, I made a podcast of my own called Gloves Off, which is about how to resist American intrusions into Canada. I mean, it's completely changed Canadian life, right?
Really?
Like until I was 33, you did not need a passport to cross the American border. I've already been turned back at the border, right, for my writing, right? So like it's I wrote for Esquire for 8 years, right? Like I did not think of going to America as a trip. Like like if I was going to see friends in Chicago, that was just hopping on a plane to see some buddies. I did not think of it as a journey, right? Like so, and I mean you have. So like the tariffs are about to hit us, like all this stuff is going to hit us hard, and we're making deals with China, but all the tariff stuff is one thing. The 51st state stuff, I mean, I have friends who are joining the military, right? I have friends who are like, and it's not just that. The thing that's really interesting is like various people in various things. I have friends in like cybersecurity and stuff like that. And like, you know, some of them have just been told you're with the military now, right? Like, and it's not to defend us against Russia and China, right? It's to defend us against the United States, which is insane. Right. I mean, it's a very odd moment because like we still have NORAD and we still have all of these, there was a poll that was like, who is Canada's number one enemy? The United States. And who was Canada's number one ally? The United States. Right. Like that's the position that we're in. I had a conversation with Margaret Atwood about it on this podcast. And she said, the key thing is to not become anti-American, because she lived through the first batch of Canadian nationalism in the 60s, right? And she was like, the key thing is to understand that at least half of them are on our side. But the truth is, I mean, if you actually ask Americans, like, do you want to invade Canada by force? It's like 4%, right? So you have this, and I mean, but people are asking questions. What happens if America invades us? What do we do? Like, and I mean, like, people that you would never, people in like biochemistry labs and people in machine learning are asking these questions. And I mean, the real thing is we have to figure out how to separate from American systems now, which we've integrated with for 80 years. It's been the whole premise of our country is like, we'll integrate, like, but even things like the financial system, the tech stack, things like this, we're having to figure out ways to pull out from it because, you guys are a bus going off a cliff and we got to get out of the bus before it goes off the cliff. Like, it's not, I don't think that's hostile. Like, I don't think anyone here feels hostility towards America. Like, I really don't. But there is like the 50 for this is the peak nationalism of my existence. I mean, by far. Like the Canada's not a flag waving country. Like now it is. Like now they're everywhere. Now you go into the grocery store, there's a 100-foot Canadian flag over the vegetables, which are no longer from America, right? Like no, like I've had to stop eating lettuce. You can't really get lettuce that's not American in Canada, right? I've had to go for sprouts now. They're not as good, but they're probably healthier for you.
Well, Stephen Marche, before we get to our last question, where's the best place for people to look for you online?
Well, I'm on my social, like Twitter. I post everything on, the enemies of the human future that we were just discussing, like the catalysts of dissension and moral outrage that are destroying politics, the possibilities of politics in the West. All of those. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of those things. That's probably the best place to find me when I post new work, for sure.
Okay. Great. We'll put some links in the description for people to check out.
Great.
And Stephen Marche, last of all, I'd just like to know, what else would you hope people take away from your book?
Well, it's funny, when I wrote it, I really was like, this is something to be taken seriously. That's what I hope people would get from it. Like, these structural flaws are really serious and they need to be addressed, like, by anyone who loves America needs to address them. Right. Like, so I don't think that needs to be explained anymore. Right. Like, that's like, I think if you have eyes to see, you can see there are problems in the American political structure. What I hope people would see now is like, the answer is not Gavin Newsom, right? The answer is not like one more lefty who's going to win. You need people, you actually need some kind of bipartisan movement to reform the entire system. Right. And of course you're going in the opposite direction of that, but when you come to your senses, that is what you're going to need to do. And in the book, it describes I think what the book serves now is to describe why that's true. Right. Like, it really isn't like picking winners and losers and people you hate and people you love. Like, there's no point in doing that anymore. Like, there needs to be something, if you really want to save the American Republic, like, and I mean, I hope America saves itself. Like, I love America. It really requires that kind of structural change.
Yeah. Well, Stephen Marche, for bringing so much nuance to this, for helping us all to see it, for your book, The Next Civil War, and for this riveting conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate it. It was great to talk to you.